my next career. Okay?
All right. Well, thanks for sticking with us, those of you who can. We're hoping the audio is better, and please let us know. I want to hear now, first from Bill Brunner, when you were campaigning whenever that was, like Wednesday of last week.
Before I suspended my campaign.
Yes, you were going around and visiting with residents and listening to their concerns, as well as trying to persuade them to vote for you. Was there a theme that you noticed? Did you find that they were well informed about what's going on with town government or how town government functions?
Well, okay, so I suspect that Mary and I are going to be magnets for viewpoints, because we obviously have some differences. Quite frankly, one of the main things that people talked to me about was space to create. And yeah, I think they're pretty well informed, and they're kind of concerned that they like Paonia, and they don't necessarily want a fundamental change pushed upon them. And it's a concern that resonates with me. I understand that. They're concerned about our water system. They're concerned that it has been neglected for so long. They're concerned about transparency of the town government. I mean, those are kind of the basic things that they're talking about. And so I tell them that as far as Space to Create goes, I think some of the ideas that Space to Create has articulated are very exciting. I really like some of their concepts. I like the concept. I love the concept of the creative citizen taking care of themselves, doing their living from their living place. The live-work situation, I mean, that's exactly what I've been doing at Paonia Iron since the 70s. I know that it works. I know how difficult it is to make it work. But at the same time, the contract that Space to Create has put forward so far doesn't meet my business criteria. I've lived on fixed price contracts basically my whole life. And a contract to be good, to be enforceable, and to be beneficial to all parties has to be very specific about who's going to do what, for whom, within what time frame, where the money's going to come from, who's paying for it, and what happens if those plans don't work out. And I just don't see any of those particulars being offered by Space to Create. And I frankly find it a little bit cheeky to suggest that these things cannot be discussed until a site is designated. We're talking about a building and a rent structure and a subsidy. And it's happened before and it'll happen again. And to say that you can't come up with ballpark numbers until you designate a site, like I say, I think it's a little cheeky. I have had conversations with some people that are close to the project, and I believe it's a very positive development to me. I think they're getting tired of the slow pace of trying to be involved with the town government, and they're considering going it without the government. They think they can pull it off themselves, and I wholeheartedly support that sort of an effort. I think that this is something that is more in the realm of the Chamber of Commerce than the town government. Some of the questions for the candidates was, how would you bring more business to Paonia? I think the government's role is to create a level playing field, provide the infrastructure, treat everybody the same, and let the private sector flourish.
So, I would like to talk about Space to Create as well, Bill, because housing came to me as well. I mean, it was the first question I got off the bat. I was walking down the street and asked a couple of people sitting out in front of Backcountry Bistro, I'm going to have a listening session. I'd like it if you came. you know, do you have concerns about the town? And the first thing that popped into their mouth was affordable housing. So yeah, it is on people's minds. And space to create, I mean, there's some misconceptions out there that at this point in time, we have to have a contract. It's like, we have to figure out what we're building before we can figure out even, we don't even know what kind of structure is it going to be. Is it going to be one building? Is it going to be a space with small entities around it? This is all in the planning process. So you don't go out and build a building without an architectural design. So yeah, that's part of what pre-development is to answer those kind of questions. Will we abide by the CHAFA rules, the State Housing and Finance Authority? And they are saying that $57,000 makes you able to be in these places. And they don't take into account family size, which to me is absolutely ludicrous. But yeah, $57,000 is what would get you into space to create if you make less than $57,000 at this point, unless we decide to go with the federal guidelines. And that's going to depend on how much it's going to cost. Again, you know, you can't build a structure without information to build that structure. We can't write a contract unless we know what we're contracting for. So we have to do this pre-development to answer all those questions that are bubbling up in people's minds about what's this going to be. And space to create absolutely is not intended to change the character of this town in any way whatsoever. All it's doing is providing housing for people who don't make a lot of money and have some kind of an art thing on the side. That's all it's doing. We don't want to bring one more person into this town to fill those spaces because we have enough need with our current population to fill every single one of those spaces. And we have said this multiple times in multiple ways. I don't want to see this community turn into Carbondale. That's my worst nightmare. When my husband and I moved here, we were SEI's very first customer. And the reason we were SEI's first customer is because SEI had to move out of Carbondale because they could no longer afford to be there. So I don't want to see that happen to Paonia. I want us to maintain the values and the community feel that we have. But I want to supply housing for our citizens.
Okay. That's a very laudable goal. My point was more to the mechanics that I've seen in town meetings, where the space to create is asking the town for commitments. The space to create very recently was very adamant about getting a site designated for this to happen. And like I say, I think there's a questionable thing going on that the town's being asked to make commitments towards space to create when none of these things are known. That's a very one-sided bargaining situation, and I think the town needs to be very careful to not commit itself to anything without having all of those questions answered. And the people that at the last Space to Create meeting, there were several people speaking for Space to Create, and they all gave different answers. Some said, there is no commitment here. Another person said, you made the commitment the first time you voted to go with this. So I'm just saying, from my perspective, I don't want the town making any commitments until the town knows the whole deal.
Well, and there's levels of commitments too, Bill. I mean, when we...
Well, if one commitment commits you to another commitment, then that's too much for me.
And it hasn't. We can stop Space to Create at any point in time.
Yes.
We do not have any kind of binding agreement with anybody that says that we have to continue. And the designation of Twin Lakes, I mean, if there was a waffly, light tissue kind of designation, that's what we got. All we needed was a kind of thing to say, can we make a plan and see if it'll work? Because you can't build a building on a plot of land when you don't know the size and dimensions and what that land is gonna need.
I think there's a lot of architects that would argue with you on that point.
Well,
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
Another question.
absolutely.
It's like, so how does this get funded?
that's the thing. I mean, right now, we've got about, I would say roughly 140,000
No, I mean, how long are these people gonna be living there? They're gonna be.
for the extent of the time that building stands.
All right, so they're getting subsidized rent
Right,
for years.
yes.
Who's paying the subsidy?
It is going to be, we're working on that. What
We're working.
we have, okay, yeah, what we have done in the past, again, this is a pre-development question. What other developments like this have done in the past is use tax credits, housing tax credits, low income, and that's what Cedar Vista lives on, is low income housing tax credits. The problem is we need more units. We only want to build 17. And the bottom end for Chaffa is 20. So, do we add 3 units so that we can meet Chaffa requirements? Or do we try a different venue? And
I don't know.
I don't know, that's the thing.
This is
These
all
are the
gobbledygook
questions,
to me.
these are the questions that pre-development will answer. Where are we gonna find the funding? We're not gonna come to the town and say, yeah, we want you to take out a bond. No way.
All right, so I thought that the excitement of the artistry that was gonna come out of this was going to be an economic driver. And that it was put out, I'm pretty sure, as that these people were gonna come in and create businesses that are going to employ people. And this is gonna help offset the job losses from mine closings. Was a specific example.
That's part of the plan, yeah.
So, if it's just an affordable housing scheme, I don't understand how that works into it.
You know, it's a side benefit.
It's a side benefit.
It's like, okay, so you take a group, and they have done sociological studies on this in Africa and various other places. You take a group of people, you provide them with more free capital, more money that they can spend. What they tend to do is to take that money and not go out and buy a big screen TV and 3 cars. They tend to invest it back into businesses and then build jobs via those businesses. And that's kind of the underlayment of this whole idea of space to create. You take a population that's struggling, that's spending 50% of their income on housing. You reduce that down to 20% of their income. That means that frees up 30% of their income that they can use to invest in other things, like their art, like having another studio, like expanding and hiring somebody to help them make their ironwork or whatever. That's the understanding for that.
Okay, great idea. Having done that for 25 years or more, I know how hard it is. And I don't see how the town gets paid back straight up out of it.
But the town isn't putting out any money.
Town's being asked to put out property that's worth maybe $500,000.
Well, we would have to get that assessed.
Well, it's a valuable piece of property. But property values may have taken a radical readjustment in the last couple of years.
Oh,
We
yeah.
don't know. We don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder about the market for these art products.
And that's something else that needs to happen. I mean, that's the other thing. If we're gonna increase economic development in this town, and that was one of those questions that we answered. How do we bring more jobs into this town? How do we develop this economy? And one way is through tourism and having the people come into town and buy the product, pack them up, and carry them home. The other thing is to build the products here and then take them to the places where they can be sold, which is what the farmers do with their farmers markets all the time. They grow the stuff here, they take it off valley to sell it. Same kind of thing. And if we could set up a distribution system or something like that, that would be helpful. And I have been in other meetings where we have talked about that, about setting up a shared distribution system that could take the things out of the valley in a way that would share the costs of being able to do that so that everybody could profit from that a little bit more. So yeah, do I want to bring more people living in the valley? No, I would like to see more people driving through the valley. I would like to see more people coming to the festivals and staying in the motels and eating in the restaurants. The biggest downfall of that tourist economy is the fact it's seasonal. And that the winter it dies off and the restaurants have to close and lay people off and jobs are scarce. And if we need a subsidiary kind of economy that will bolster that, yeah, let's keep bringing the people in. And then let's find some other ways to build jobs in this town so that we can have year-round employment for our people. I would love to see a Choco kind of factory go back out by Volunteer Park. To me, that would be a huge win for this community.
I think you should be the president of the Chamber of Commerce.
I am on the Chamber of Commerce,
There you
Bill.
go.
So I'm on the board of the Chamber
In
of
my
Commerce.
view, that is the proper place for this kind of stuff to be coming from, because there are so many we-hopes in all of that, as I said, I think the town government should be focusing on the core functions of the town, providing the water, taking away the trash, making sure the toilet flushes, providing public safety, and making sure the park is in good shape, and taking care of the streets.
So I have a
I
question.
believe that is
Okay.
the function of the government.
But I have a question for you, Bill.
Yeah.
How much time do you think the town spends on Space to Create?
Quite a bit, actually.
I mean, quantify it for me.
I mean,
Give me a
it
ballpark.
is the
figure.
perception of the community that it is a major focus of the town government.
I
You
would say.
you tell me how much time.
Okay, I sit in those meetings. And so we have, I would say, 40 meetings per year at 1 to 1.5 hours a meeting. So we're talking 60 hours a year is what we're spending on Space to Create. How is that a serious drain on the town government and what the town government does?
I don't know, people are gonna have to decide.
I can guarantee you the town spends a heck of a lot more time. And if you look at the board agendas and what we look at every time that we sit as a board, I mean, Space to Create is way down at the bottom of the agenda where it's just a reporting thing. And half the time we don't get to it because we haven't gotten through everything anyway. So yeah, I mean, the board is not focusing on Space to Create. It comes up when it comes up. And then it goes and does its stuff all on its own. And most of the work of Space to Create is being done by the other members of the community.
Right, so maybe that's the problem, why there aren't more concrete proposals, is the board's not putting enough time into it. I mean, I don't know.
No, I don't think you talked the board into that one, Bill, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, we have spent a good amount of time on Space to Create, which is good because you were hearing
It's a topic.
Yeah,
things around the
so
community.
let me tell you about some of the other things that I've been hearing
All right,
out there.
yes.
And one of the things that has come up in mine is taxes for businesses. And the other big one that I get all the time is business owners saying, we don't have a voice. With people who are on the water companies outside of town saying, we don't have a voice. It's the people, and they don't. And that's the thing, all those people that live in the mazes that come into town and spend their money and volunteer for this town and make it run in so many ways.
Well, they're part of the community.
Exactly, they're part of the community. So how can we make them more part of the community? Is this the time when we need to start talking about a home rule town and changing our designation?
Now wait, how would making it a home rule town bring them in? You'd have to expand the town boundaries.
No, what we could do is, because of the way this statutory town is set up.
So this is your question, go ahead.
No, I guess so.
Now I know what the question made it on the questionnaire, but go ahead.
One of the ways it limits us is that things that pertain to the town can only be voted on by the people who live within the borders of the town. Now, if we were a home rule town, we could change those rules and we could say, If you are a water company and there's a water issue, then the people who get water from the town can vote on that. If you're a business owner, you're allowed to vote on town issues. That gives us more freedom to do that kind of stuff. Now again, is it gonna be a process to do that? Yeah. Is it gonna cost us money? Yeah. And it's a weighing. Is it worth it to do this and to actually change our designation?
I would question very highly. You better figure out what's going on before you get into that.
Oh, yeah.
You've got several tiers of local government in the state of Colorado. You've got towns, you've got cities, and you've got home rule cities. Okay.
And home rule towns.
And home rule towns. Generally speaking, a town is less than 2,000 people.
Right.
And there's a special section in the state law for towns, small towns like this. And then over 2,000 people, you get into cities. And cities have a whole different set of rules. They're much more stringent. The law really it's really the Wild West for small towns. For example, the cities are required to get bids and take the lowest bid unless there's a compelling reason not to. Towns do not have that requirement. The powers of mayor for a city, he's basically a sheriff. For the town of Paonia, Mary and I are vying for the ceremonial head of the town.
Right.
That's pretty much how far our power goes. Then you get into home rule stuff. Okay, so both the city and the town are working within the structure of a known set of state laws that we adopt.
Right.
And when you go to the home rule, then you start creating your own laws. And I would submit to you that from what I've seen in the town of Paonia, I don't think we should go there because we are not that adept at knowing and following the law.
Well, and I would
So
say,
I think home rule is when you grow up.
it's a can of worms. I agree, it's a complete can of worms that we would have to get into, and it is not my first choice. I would like to see the committees opened up to public input, period. And anybody, whether they live in the outlying areas or in town, can come to committee meetings. And I tried to push that before I ever got on the board and was shut down cold. I think that's a good way to get people to do.
We shut it down?
Yeah, Dave Bradford specifically.
Shut down coal?
No, cold, it's C-O-L-D.
Oh, cold. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay, sure. You did what?
Boy, you guys are good.
Okay. So you're saying, let's not get into individuals here.
Right, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
excuse me, let's not go there. But, so you think that there was more, I mean, there has been a lot more community
In the last 2
involvement
years, in the
past. And, you know, so one power that the mayor has is the mayor sets the committees. That's the mayor's job.
Right.
If I was the mayor, I would make all committees 3-person committees. The mayor would be a member of every committee. What that does is that makes every committee as an open public meeting that the public can attend. It has to be advertised 24 hours in advance, and all the other board members can attend. And one of the reasons that I think that would be a good deal is the open meeting law that we have in the state of Colorado is very stringent. 2 board members, 2 elected officials can talk.
Yep.
If A talks to B, that's okay.
Right.
If B then goes to C and talks about the same thing they talked about A with, that's a violation of that law. That's a serial meeting. This is a very hard thing to live with and yet have a collegiate, communicative atmosphere amongst the board. And I think going to the 3-man committee, not that the mayor would attend every committee, but it would make all the committees open to the public and the rest of the board. And it could be a more informal atmosphere where people can discuss this stuff that's important to us and know what each other thinks. And I think that those meetings should probably happen in the hour before the regular board meetings. When I was on the board in the 90s, that's what we did. We had a work session before each town meeting. The engineer was there. People with issues came. The reporter was there. It was a pretty free-flowing discussion. And pretty much all we talked about was water. But I think that it's a structure that we should go to that would open this up to It would open things up a lot. It really would.
Well, and I
And-
don't know that we necessarily have to make it a three-person meeting to just open the meetings to the public, because it's only two people.
Well,
Yeah.
if there are three, if
Well,
there are
it's
three board
mandated.
members on the committee, it's guaranteed.
Yeah, it's
an
mandated.
open meeting. Now, there are situations that arise where it's probably not proper
Absolutely.
for that to be a public meeting. There
Yeah.
are personnel things, there are contractual matters that can be discussed. The board members on those committees have no authority to make any decisions. They can
Right.
only listen, talk, and bring
Right.
it back to the board. It would automatically be open to the public if it were the three-person.
Well, I think it's a step we don't have to take, but then we can
That's
disagree
why,
about this.
that's why we're here. That's why we're
The
here.
one committee I really would like to get set up is I'd like to see a water advisory board put together.
Yeah, I hope there isn't a whole lot of argument about that.
Yeah,
The people that are on the water that don't live in town deserve a lot more
I
consideration
agree
than they
completely.
get.
Yeah,
I've said this in public meetings, and I will say it again. I think that we should certainly consider reforming our the way that the water is run. As it is, the water is a standalone corporation
yeah, it's an
formed
enterprise.
out of the Bruce Amendment that limited towns' taxable income. And so the things like the water, the sewer, and the trash were turned into corporations to provide that function.
Their
And
funds,
therefore,
yeah.
they get around the taxing limit.
Right,
Okay, and the board of directors for that business is now named as the town council.
Mhm.
I don't think it has to be that. I think it could be elected at large from the community that uses Paonia water. And I think that should be our ultimate goal. If you want to be inclusive of the community, there you go. That's a way to make it happen right there.
well, and I think let's set up the water advisory board.
It's a
Let's
step,
see if
it's a
it
step in
works.
that direction.
Let's see if it works. If it
Yeah.
works, then we'll let it ride. If it's not working and it's not giving us the results we want, then yeah, let's take it to the next step. But let's try step one before we leap off into whatever.
I think moving in that direction is a very good idea.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Other issues that people brought up to you?
Zoning, interestingly enough,
Oh, interesting.
that people were concerned. I had one business owner specifically that was concerned about zoning in the town and that the restrictions on what she could do and could not do with her properties within the town. And I'm glad that we're looking at the zoning thing and reevaluating it. It's been
We're
what?
not
a lot.
actually involved in a very deep dive into our
Well-
zoning rules at the moment.
Well, and that's true. We're just
We're not.
kind of doing
We're
a
not.
cursory.
We
And
should,
it's been
I agree,
5
we
years.
should, we're not.
Well, and hopefully, that's the other thing, I really want to push to get the master plan done. We need this document, we desperately need this document, and it can drive some of these discussions as well, as to where we want to go and what we want to do with our town and the areas surrounding it. I wish that we had some kind of control over, like, more than outside of town, because
You have
It's
a
like-
lot of control outside of town. They've got a 3-mile sphere of influence
exactly,
mandated by the state.
exactly, but, you know, you
And,
look at,
and we've broken that into closer and farther tiers.
right,
And people outside of town are required to go through our building permit system for new construction.
within a certain
And the
radius.
county has agreed to defer to our zoning wishes for that area. We've got a lot
Right,
of-
exactly, the 133
We have
corridor,
a lot
absolutely.
of influence on those people's lives, and we need to have them on our planning committee. We have in the past, and we
I
should
would like
again.
to see that again as well.
Yeah.
I would like to see, people outside of town be part of
You know,
this.
I agree, I'm kind of a nerd in this area. The comprehensive plan we have now, I can actually take a lot of credit for.
Ah,
I talked the board at that time into doing that,
mm,
and we hired a consultant
mhm,
who got a lot of community involvement
mhm.
and came up with that plan. And it has been one of the sleepiest documents that the town has ever had. You know, I think in 16 when I got on board, I'm not even sure the town had a complete copy of it that they could just lay their hands on. So I agree it's important, but I wouldn't put my hopes too much on the world changing around it.
Oh, no, I think it's a guiding
But
document,
I
that's
think
all
you've
it
gotta
is.
keep your goal in mind, and I agree, I think our zoning is messed up, okay? How we got our zoning was, we didn't have zoning,
Right,
okay? And the mines were booming,
yes,
okay?
Yes.
And they were coming up with hundreds of water taps from the town.
right,
And the town fathers were legitimately concerned that there were gonna be man camps springing up on vacant lots in town without sanitation and, you know, whatever. And so they said, God, give us zoning. And they adopted some zoning rules that were very cookie cutter. And at the time they did it, zoning was it wasn't as developed as it is now either. And Paonia's never really gone back and done a comprehensive redo of that zoning.
well,
And so what you've got now is you got a situation where, like, I'm zoned industrial, and I gotta say, in terms of space to create, you probably don't want me as your neighbor some of the time. I run an iron shop.
well, you may not want some of those space to create people playing their drums at 3 o'clock in the morning either.
Okay, so my observation on the industrial zone is that there is almost nothing that's ever happened in the industrial zone in this town that was permitted by right, by the rules that we have for the industrial zone. And what this does is it sets up a situation where you have uneven enforcement. And when you have uneven enforcement, all of a sudden one day you realize you've got selective enforcement. And we've had selective enforcement, and selective enforcement is bad government, okay? It sets neighbor against neighbor. And that's what these rules are for, is to keep it's rules so we know what to do. We know what we can expect, we know what our neighbor can do, we know what we can do. And yes, we have a lot of work to do working on our zoning. One of the things that we need to change is we've got a screwy rule that popped up from I don't know where, that we have a situation now where our retail space downtown can be cannibalized into residential space. And this takes away the potential for sales tax, and it takes away the reality of commercial property tax. Just around the corner here on 3rd Street.
Oh, that little piece,
we had
yes.
a commercial building that was turned into a duplex.
Right.
And that's,
Exactly.
if that's legal under our zoning is wildly messed up. And then on the other side of that, you've got the industrial zone, where I've been living in the building that I live and work in for a long time. That's not permitted by right. When I saw that, I'm not even sure that I can pass that right on to another owner. I think that obviously the industrial zone should have the same rights as the commercial zone. If we're gonna have the right to live, work, live over your shop, it needs to be universal. And I think another thing that relates back to space to create, I don't think we have a zone in this town that's actually a place where space to create can grow into, given the structure, the actual allowable uses under our zoning rules. And I think we need to go back and look at them fundamentally and make sure that we provide the opportunity that we're trying to give these space to create people to everybody as a matter of right. And that's going to be a careful balance, because, you know, we don't want the drummers next to the senior home, and
No,
you
we
know,
don't want
so
the iron workers next to the.
we've got some work to do.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, so those are the things: the jobs, water, taxes, housing.
So nobody asked about streets and sidewalks?
I think people have given up on this.
I was just gonna say, you know, that is such a tough thing. We tried a $21 million grant to the feds last year to see if we could get some infrastructure done, and we were turned down cold. And the feds just aren't putting any money out there for infrastructure. So we can go on another subject. Let's talk about pot for potholes.
Okay, well, I'll talk about pot for potholes, but then I'm gonna have a subject, okay? So, yeah, I don't think that it would be proper for the board to say we're gonna have pot shops.
Oh, I agree.
We had an election that was
agree.
divisive. I'm surprised that someone hasn't put it back again. I think we'd probably pass this time. In my view, pot shops are like a bar or liquor store. They need some
Exactly.
regulation. I don't see a fundamental difference.
Exactly, yeah, and I think it needs to go to the voters.
And
Let's
I
get it on
don't
the
think
November ballot.
I don't think it's gonna be a panacea, a huge money, but
No.
I think we're kind of late in the curve.
Yeah, well,
But we have a brand.
yes, we do. The thing is, you know, the one town that's really analogous to us is Mancos. And they did pull in $510,000 worth of money off their 3 pot shops. The difference between Mancos and us is Mancos sits on the highway between Durango and Mesa Verde. And so there's a lot of traffic, but we have festivals. We got a lot of festivals. And if we can do something that can promote this throughout the year, we might actually get some traffic coming into this town in the winter time for those pot shops.
So my question is, we did a budget resolution a couple of meetings ago where the town starts the year with a budget.
It was originally budgeted.
Right, $700,000. I think if we were back to paying close attention to the core functions of the town government, we wouldn't be going over the budget by $700,000.
Well, we
And
didn't go
we'd be able
over.
to add that to the $500,000 that you think we might get from the pot shops, and then we might actually get a street paved.
But a whole bunch of that money went to the water crisis too.
130,000.
So that's still.
Right,
that's
out of 700,000, it's, okay, so there's, whatever the math is, there's still a big chunk that wasn't the water crisis. And there's a big chunk you throw in the trash truck. There's a.
Well, you know, we cannot know, the trash truck was dumping trash on the road as it drove down the road. We had that money set aside. Yes, we spent it on a trash truck that we absolutely needed.
Right, so the two of those together is about 300,000. So there's another $400,000 in that budget resolution that I think we should be paying closer attention to the core functions and holding our budgets. Because what I think is we've got a lot of work to do if we're going to fix our water system. And I think we need to squeeze the town budget, cut out all possible non-essential expenses, and put the rest of the money towards paying off debt or improving our infrastructure.
All right. I want you to tell me what you think is wrong with the water system.
It's vulnerable to the variations of the weather.
Every water system that lives in a temperate climate is vulnerable to the variations in the weather.
Right.
I mean, that just goes without saying. You cannot build a bulletproof system.
Now, I didn't say we could build a bulletproof system, but I think we can build a reasonable system. Or make the decision to live where we are. Because what we've got is, we've known for decades that Paonia cannot continue with normal healthy growth without coming up with a reservoir. And it's been ignored.
Well,
The people
now I have to say, Bill, we talked about that in Public Works Committee from the very first day that I got on that committee. So it hasn't died and it hasn't gone away. It's just, we have priorities. You gotta deal with the priorities first. You cannot jump to a reservoir when you're trying to get the water mains replaced. You can't jump to a reservoir when we're looking at having to reline the 2 million gallon tank next year. We have to find a way to fund that sucker before we build a reservoir, because the state's gonna mandate that and it's gonna shut down our tank if we don't get it relined. So it's priorities.
Well, you know, it just, you know, about that 2 million gallon tank, the project that we finished up at the end of 2015 was supposed to include another tank up there, specifically so that that tank could be worked on, and that was cut out of the town budget.
Well,
And there were water lines to connect the 2 treatment plants so that all the water from all the springs could be funneled to either treatment plant. That didn't happen either. What I was going to say is that the town fathers that made the deal for the arched taps knew that we needed a reservoir in order to make that real. We have a contract on those taps that requires us to be able to provide that water, whether those taps are activated or not. The town fathers bought a reservoir. It's called Todd Reservoir. It's up on the slopes of Land's End.
Yeah, and it's non-functional.
It's built on talus and it leaks. You can't fill it.
Right.
And now I assume that they thought they could do something to fix that.
Yeah.
The 2000 water study actually puts numbers on what it would take to fix that. They also look at a reservoir at the base of the Bell Creek Springs area. They look at enlarging the Todd Reservoir. They look at enlarging the Lone Cabin Reservoir, and they put numbers to all of these projects, and they calculate the amount of water versus the cost, and they come up with a project that the Lone Cabin Reservoir is the one to do.
Well, actually, I would disagree. I would think that the more recent studies that have looked at it, Rover is the better one. We share water, we have
There's a more
contract.
recent study that identifies Rover?
Well, I mean discussions with people.
Discussions.
I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, so it's,
The Rover is the one, it's already functional, it would cost a whole lot less to increase the capacity of Rover Reservoir than it would be to build a new one.
sure, and there's a range of options at both of them, but we're talking about the same thing. And the
Yes.
thing is that we've known for a long time, the study in 2000 and in 2004 put a number to it, that the town is hundreds of taps beyond the point where we can meet our
Now, I'm
commitments.
gonna argue that study with you, Bill, because they counted the out-of-town water taps twice in that study. So their consumption figures are
Counted twice.
outrageous.
They
Yes,
counted them twice.
yes, they counted them twice when
Okay,
they
so
did
if
those
they counted them
figures.
twice, then we were at the level of sustainability at that time. And we've added, at that time, they counted 1,130 taps total on the system. So I don't know what you're talking about, they counted them twice. The town has recently put out the number of 1,660 taps. And I plugged the difference between those into an online compound interest calculator, and it says it was 100% under 2% growth per year to get to where we are now.
Well, we haven't
Which is-
experienced 2% growth per year.
According to those numbers, we have.
Well, the thing is, you know, you look at the town of Paonia's population, we have stayed basically the same since 1980.
This is the population on the water system. You may have noticed there's been a lot of development
Right, and I
around the
can't
town.
wait to see the census figures for the whole area, to see exactly how many people we actually have in this area. But how many of those buildings are actually occupied by people, and how many of those buildings
That really
are
doesn't matter.
like
It's how many
Airbnb.
taps are we building?
But if your
for?
tap is not pulling water, it's not.
How many, you think there's unoccupied buildings out there?
Stewart Mesa Schoolhouse is supposed to be an Airbnb, and it can't be an Airbnb until it's not occupied.
Okay, so there's a few houses that are unoccupied. I don't think it's gonna be a significant number. We've got a seller's market here. We don't have a huge inventory of empty dwellings.
But we're
with water
finding
taps.
these numbers out, Bill. The water study that we have now, that the town wrote the RFP for in the middle of July, looks at all of that stuff. We are doing it. We are looking at I can read you exactly what that study is gonna be looking at. Completely analyzing our systems from springs to taps, water treatment and storage, raw water availability, the number of taps the system can support, any improvements or upgrades that are needed, staffing requirements and staff training, and new raw water storage potential. That's what that study is looking at.
Well, I can tell you what they're gonna come down to.
What?
Based on 3 previous studies
One was
that I have
only looking
copies
at
of.
filtration.
And that study said, okay, here's how that study relates. They said that they were contractually obligated by the town to only refer to the previous studies if it were absolutely necessary. And in Appendix D, they make the statement that we have to refer to that study and state again that the town cannot continue with normal healthy growth without building a reservoir. That was the 2014
Okay,
study.
then find us the money to do that, Bill, because we're still gonna
I
struggle.
would
Find us the money
assume there's going to
do
be
the
a
tank first.
bond issue, and the people of the town are gonna have to decide if they wanna fix the system or if they wanna shut it off right here.
Well, let's get the data from the water study first.
But
Before we
absolutely.
jump off, I mean,
This is-
20-year-old data is not really valid anymore.
What I don't
Even
understand.
with the water running off the.
It's, how, I don't understand how it's not
I'm
done.
gonna call time out here. It is 15 minutes after
Oh my,
7 o'clock.
time flies when you're having fun.
And you've solved most of the problems of the town, I'm sure.
Let's move the world.
Together, Bill, we can conquer it all.
I don't know about that, but maybe we can help smooth the water.
Were there any other questions that came in that we needed to look at?
The only direct question was, why should the town be leasing land to Space to Create for free?
And we'd spend a lot of
Yes.
time.
Right, we already spent a lot of time on Space to Create.
I don't know, can't tell you.
Well, I want to thank you both and invite you to give your
Oh, go for it.
Oh, closing statement?
Closing statement. Now that you're all energized.
I don't know. You know, here we are. You make me mayor, you make her mayor, it's your choice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've had a good, healthy discussion and discussed a lot of things in a good way. And I really appreciate sitting down next to you, across from you, though, I'm sorry, and having this discussion. I think it's been illuminating for both of us.
Sure.
And I'm glad we did it. And I'm sure the voters of Paonia will make their decision based on all kinds of factors and make the best decision for the town.